Okay, this week let's take a look at the process of culling images. I was up at Fort Ticonderoga again this weekend, and I like to do a um, fast shutter. So I have it do multiple shots at a time, and I have it turned off mechanical. So these are just digital shutters. So to give you an idea of what that ended up giving me for number of pictures, there they are. Um, 859 photographs in total. And I shot a couple of videos that I've got to go back over and edit. But let's start off with the images. Now, one of the advantages of doing a multiple shot setup, you can see here where right in the middle of this picture is this drone fly. It's of the hoverfly variety. And if we go from picture to picture, you can see that I got it at multiple times of its wings beating. So I could see basically the flight of the hoverfly. But this isn't the only place I use this process. What I like to do when I'm taking photographs, and it doesn't matter what I'm photographing, is leave the shutter so that it will do multiple shots. Now, the reason I do that on even things like flowers is I want to make sure that, maybe the wind's blowing. Maybe I don't have an insect like this and I just want to capture a flower. And with the wind blowing, it can change how that background looks. And by having multiple copies of that photograph, it allows me to pick out which background I like the best. Okay. And if we remember, as I talked about bokeh, you can see how bokeh plays a role in these photographs, where I've got my subject in focus and the background is just this wonderful blur of color in the background. Here it's the blur of the wall behind it. Again, here the blur of the wall. So that's what I like to do when I'm taking the photographs. Now let's go back and we'll come out of here and we'll look at it from a more practical standpoint. So here you have this guy walking along. And it's a bright day. So it was very hard for me to get his eyes actually open. But you can see here I got a good shot. The shadow changed as we went. So this allowed me to get those differences in shadow and to see what the image was going to look like with those different playing of light on his face. Let's go down here to another set. Here I had them lining up to get ready for their photograph, or actually to walk in. Um, they weren't posing. I was just waiting for them to get in position. And as you can see, they do so here. But no matter how I tried, I couldn't get him in that position where he was facing. But if we look at the leader, I just wanted to get her with her eyes open and try to get other people the same way. Was trying to get the gentleman over here turned, but He was busy talking off to the side, and I never quite got that shot. And again, trying to make sure that everybody looked good in the photograph. So my process of culling is to group my shots. I've got several shots where I took them with it going fast shutter, and I just look for what I think is going to be the best of the grouping. It's like here I had this one, went with this instead. They're virtually identical. There's just a minor change to it. Part of it is me taking this piece off the side, but waiting for her to get her hat on and get straightened up, which didn't happen. Portrait shots. Again, trying to make sure that I had the eye where I wanted it, which I'm not posing these guys. And the reason I'm not doing that is they were performing at the time. They were all laid out in a row. See the difference here with his foot. But they were all um, in a row so they could show off their musical instruments to the audience. I was not going to get in the way of their demonstration, their performance that they were doing here. But I did want to try to get everybody and make sure I had good photographs where I could see the eye, the face was clear. That's what I was looking for in these photos. So I just kept walking through every single photograph, and it's a time-consuming process. Now, of the 859 that I've got here, if I go back and filter back to my pits, I dropped it down to 81. And I might say that's an awful lot of pictures taken and only using some. I could have gotten more out of here if I click this off, for example. I do have more photographs of the leader, but her face was in an odd way, or she was posed standing in a way I didn't like. Her eyes were closed. So, especially when it's coming to an unposed shoot, having these multiple images come through makes it much easier to pull out the best of the best in that set. And we're not in the days of film. Now, if I were to back in the days of film, 859 at 24 images per roll, although you could get to 36, that's an awful lot of photographs that you're taking. And that's a lot of rolls of film. So if that were back in the day of film, that would be 36 rolls of film that I'd have to go through. To make it worse, in order to get the best of the best, they would have to be all developed, contact prints done. And for those of you who don't remember the days of contact prints, those were prints that were about the size of the negative, so that you didn't have to take a magnifying glass to the negative, reverse the color in your head so that you could figure out if that was the image you wanted or not. They were basically negative sized prints on paper that you could then take a look at, these individual small photographs, and then take a magnifying glass to it, because there was no way you could just click and enlarge onto a face to go see what you thought of the image. Was not going to happen. So this allows for a lot more creativity in the images that you take, because being digital, it's not really costing you anything other than the card that you've got and the time it takes you to go through the photographs. So you can take a lot more photographs and be a lot more creative and take more chances, if you will, in what you're doing, because you're not going to have this gigantic processing bill at the end of the shoot. Again, we'll take a look here at the end. Something else that becomes very valuable when you've got the ability to take multiple shots is they were going to fire off the cannon. I apologize for bouncing that quite so much. So I got them as they were loading the cannon, but when they go to fire the cannon, there's going to be a gap between when the order is given to fire and when the cannon actually goes off. By letting the camera just sit on that and go, you can see right here, he's putting it down to light the cannon. You can see the flare coming up from that hole to light that off, and then boom, it goes off. And because I have the camera locked open so that it's taking multiple pictures, not only do I get the image itself and the lead ups to it, you can see what I get for the aftermath of it, but in the image itself, look at the fire coming out of the cannon mouth. I don't know any other way to do that, because if you even had a camera that would go off with a boom, it's not going to catch this. All right, second shot still has some fire coming out of the cannon mouth, and here it's cleared. But again, it's you get that big burst of smoke that came out. You can see in the smoke itself the little bits of the wadding that they use. And if you're not familiar with cameras, we'll do a quick, or cannons, we'll do a quick check here. I was doing a lot more portraiture type stuff, and up here we had this gentleman, and he was showing off the different pieces that were used in the cannon, depending on what was going to be done. But every cannon that gets fired has to have some kind of wadding material. And there it is. Because this was by the ocean, you ended up with rope that was cut or worn or whatever. You ended up with junk rope, and you would take that together and you would make this ball out of it. So what you saw in the cloud from the cannon was actually bits of this being fired out of the cannon itself. You're going to put in your gunpowder, a wadding, the cannonball, and another wadding that holds everything in place. All of it's pressed down to the back so that when the cannon goes off, all of that gets expelled from the cannon itself. But again, this is a more action type situation where you're going to have something that's going to happen, and you just want to make sure that you capture it and get the entire experience of the cannon going off. Again, you can see here, you can see the little bits of flame coming out. Some of it is that burning wadding that you also see in the cloud again as it comes out of the cannon itself. So for me, I shoot with the mechanical shutter off on my Canon R5, to the detriment of the fact that I can't tell how many photographs I've taken, so I have to kind of guesstimate how many have gone through based on how long I've gotten the button pushed down. Sometimes I'm better than others with that estimate, but it's not going click, 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 click. So if you're taking a picture of somebody, they're not hearing that multiple click going off and possibly getting nervous about how many pictures you're taking. They simply don't know how many pictures you're taking. In addition, with that mechanical off, this takes a lot more pictures in a much shorter period of time because it's not having to cycle that shutter in between each picture. So you're getting almost like taking stills out of a movie that's happening in front of you. And I do that because I want to make sure that with all of the variables that could happen, the wind if I'm taking pictures of flowers or something similar, or somebody's eyes being opened or closed. I mean, how many times have you taken a picture of somebody and their eyes are closed because they happen to blink while you took the picture? By having multiple pictures in there, they may blink, but it doesn't matter because you've got a picture with their eyes open somewhere in that strip, and you're not paying for hundreds of dollars of processing just to find that good picture in there, or trying to strain your eyes looking at a magnifying glass at this little image to try to see if what you thought was there is actually there and that they have their eyes open. So again, as you can see, lots of time elapsed. So if we go back up here, I believe he's put the match to it right around here. Oh, he's getting close. Closer, closer. Almost there. Actually see the flame getting closer and closer to the point. Again, that fire to it actually going off, he has to raise that old style road flare, if you will, up to set off the cannon. You can see step by step as it gets there. And then the delay. I'm going to let that preview come up so you can see that it's there. And it still hasn't gone off yet. So you can see just how long, there's the flare coming up from the cannon itself, before the cannon goes off. That's a lot of photographs, and I'm doing this to show how many photographs actually were taken by the camera. And this was on the slower setting for the R5. How many pictures were actually taken before the cannon went off? Now, if this were set on the higher setting, there'd be a ton of photographs in there that wouldn't be of any use to me. Although, honestly, having these where he's setting it off is really kind of cool. From my perspective, I love capturing everything. So this allows me to get those action shots in situations where I have no control over what's going to happen. And let's be honest, when you're taking a portrait of somebody, you have no control over what's going to happen. They could blink, they could sneeze, a stray gust of wind could come along while you're just waiting for them to pop their eyes open or something and move their hair if you're shooting outside, even if you're shooting inside, if you got a fan going. So there's many things that can happen, but having the shutter open and letting it click through these things is a great way to make sure that you've got a set of images around it. Now, we're not doing HDR, and I'm not going to talk about HDR here, but we're just taking that same photograph with the same settings on the camera just to capture several photos around when you started, just so that you can see what's the best image that you've got. And again, 859 photographs. It cost me zero processing. All I had to do was put the card in and load it into Lightroom. Lightroom lets me put it up in this big grid. I can even do before and afters on them if I want to, or I can compare one to the next and just go through and do my picks. You see it says select and candidate. Here's the one I was looking at. Here's my comparison shot. So there's no reason from a monetary standpoint to not do this. From a practical standpoint, if you're trying to get a lot of photographs out the door quickly, then you're probably best off just trying to do the single shot method. And the reason I say that is it doesn't take a long time necessarily to go through, especially if all your pictures look good. For example, when I look at the original photographs that I had on the flowers, they all pretty much look the same. Quite honestly, I mean, I did adjust based off of what I liked or didn't like about the background and the positioning of the flowers in the background. So I did do a little bit of work along that. But overall, it was pretty quick to go pick out a photograph that I liked in there. If you're looking for something specific in a portrait, like are their eyes open, it can be just as quick. Put it on your screen, blow it up around their eyes, and just with Lightroom, you can just use the arrow keys to keep walking forward till you find one you like, hit the P key, and move on. Again, I do them in sections. So this is a section with this flower, and that is what I would evaluate at this point, is just this one photograph. Right? Same with this guy. Everything's pretty much the same on every single photograph. So it just how I felt about the background in there. It was my own personal preference. It was easy to kick through and click and pick out which ones I liked. So the only time that you would not want to do multiple photographs is if you just don't have the time to go through those multiple photographs and process them. And as you can see down my numbers over here, so far for 2023, I've shot almost 5,000 photographs. All right, on the 23rd, I was up there and I shot 1,423 photographs. Again, that was them doing a reenactment. It was a lot of run and gun, and I don't have to worry about it as much when I've got the multiple photographs because I have a live situation in front of me with movement, and I can figure out which one I like of the shots that are there. So that's what I got for you this week. Culling is an art and a process. So the better you are at recognizing and thinking about what you want in the photograph and what's important to you in the photograph, so it's not the entire photograph. When I look at this photograph of the flower, I'm not paying attention to anything other than, is the flower in focus? What do I think of the background? And I really do enjoy, I'll repeat it over and over again, the bokeh. I love the fact that I've got this flower captured dead center. It's absolutely tack sharp. It's a 45 megapixel picture, so it takes a moment for it to render here. But you can see how sharp that image of the flower is. And yet at the same time, that background just falls away into this wonderful blur of greens and purples and reds. And it just makes for a great background to my subject, which is the flower. So that's just me throwing another pitch in for bokeh. So when you're out shooting, if you can, and you got the time to process it afterwards, go ahead and take the multiple shots. If you've got a mechanical shutter and the person's going to hear it, you may not want to shoot more than 2 or 3. Although, to be honest, I had one of my best photographs I ever had was this trio of girls that were really hamming it up for the camera. Now, one realized I was taking the multiple pictures and was just kept changing her position as we went, so I just kept taking pictures. But the third one in there suddenly realized how many pictures I had taken and came out with that hey expression, and I got it on film, digital. So I got that picture of her coming toward me like that, which I wouldn't have gotten without that clicking sound going off. But from my perspective, a lot of people get a little nervous when they hear that clicking sound. And they might be nervous when they go to take the picture in the first place. So by having those multiple images taken, they might relax just a little bit from that initial thought of they're going to take my picture. And having those multiples, you might get something a little better and a little more relaxed and a little more natural looking later on. That's what I got for you this week, and I'll talk to you guys